your evidence to support those points. And just to reiterate what your parley said, looking for the same types of things. And good luck today, and congratulations on making it to finals at Yale.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to judge. I really enjoyed judging so far. I'm a third-year law student out at Villanova University, right outside of Philadelphia. I did Congress when I was in high school on the local and the national level. I also did public forum, but mainly competed in Congress. That being said, my paradigm is also online, but I mainly judge on argumentation. So I believe that the debate should have logical reasoning, explanation, and if you could just have a reasonable speed too. Spreading is a little hard for me to follow. It's a little too fast for me. So I will weigh the quality of your content over the quantity of it. So yeah, have fun and good luck.
Okay, thanks for having me here, everyone, and congratulations on making it this far. I coach and teach for Bridge High School in New Jersey. I teach world history, European history, and best of all, AP government, politics, and economics. So I love Congress. And so what I'm looking for in round as a result of that content is making sure that you guys are actually role-playing members of Congress, in this case, senators, accurately, that you're not going beyond the powers that Congress actually has. I'd love to see you actually thinking about your constituents within your speeches, thinking about why you would be passing these bills or not passing these bills. So I always like to see the impacting out about what would happen if the bill did pass or didn't pass. Other than that, I agree with what everyone has said before. I do think, especially when you get to like later on in the round, given there's 12 of you, you're probably going to be doing a lot more crystalling, and wrapping up the arguments, not just repeating what people have said before. Other than that, I'm looking forward to a great round. Congratulations, and let's have some fun.
I think I'm the last judge left. Hi, everyone. My name's Ben. I'm currently a sophomore in college. In high school, I competed in congressional debate. And basically, I kind of want to see what everyone else wants to see. I want to see lots of clash. I want to see crystallizations for the end speeches. And also, because it's Congress, I want to see some good speaking, some good rhetoric that can only help you. And my paradigm's also online if you want to look at that in depth. So yeah, also my Wi-Fi may not be the best. So don't be alarmed if my camera turns off because I'm currently in a public space, but I will always be listening to your speech. So don't worry about that.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So let's get started with nominations for presiding officer. One thing I will tell you first, when you make motions, remember that you are moving. So I move, I motion to, right? Just a reminder, I'm going to eradicate this from one chamber at a time, and you are going to do it the correct way. I'll love it. Okay, so I'll open the floor for presiding officer nominations. Representative or Senator Condon.
I move to nominate Representative Khan.
I humbly accept.
Thank you. Senator Wu.
I move to nominate Senator Crowley.
I humbly accept.
Thank you. Senator Wu.
I move to close the floor for PO nominations.
Is there a second? Okay, it looks like we have everyone in agreement for a second, and hearing no objection, we'll close the floor. So we have Senators Khan and Senators Crowley. So I will ask that you all will give us a brief statement of qualifications. These will not be scored by the judges, and I will set up the poll for us. So Senator Khan, if you'll go first.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Isaac Khan, and I'm running to be your presiding officer. First and foremost, congratulations to you all for making it here to the final round. It's really awesome to be here with you all today. Now, I know that both me and Senator Crowley are going to be fast, fair, equal, and tech savvy because That's how we got here. So what I can offer you as a PO is 4 years of high school experience and a passion for congressional debate. At this point in the season, I PO'd over 50 hours and at every major national tournament in a virtual setting. In fact, I also PO'd my way into this final round, and last year, I presided this round at this tournament. So I can promise you that you'll be in good hands if you vote for me. I want to emphasize that my job as a PO is to serve all of you in this chamber so that I can facilitate the SEMS round, the finals round, that you all deserve. As a testament to my standard of efficiency and equity, everyone in my semifinal round got 2 speeches and at least 2 questions. And for everyone else in today's round, I have a spreadsheet ready for transparency and color-coded time cards. So good luck, and I would love if you would vote for me today. Just remember, you can't say Congress without calm.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Senator Crowley. Once again, congrats to making it to the final round. I'm gonna make this quick because I value efficiency. I've PO'd multiple national outrounds, Glenbrooks, Harvard, etc., but more importantly, I've PO'd a whole bunch of online tournaments, so I know what works, but I also know what doesn't. There's 2 things that I'll do to help you all out. I'll be using these color-coded time cards because they're much easier to see on the screen, and of course, I will be sharing my precedence and recency with you so you can see where you're at in the round and hold me accountable as well. Above all else, I believe that this round is really about you all, and I'll work hard to ensure speaking equity and that this is a great round for everyone. Once again, that's Senator Crowley. I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Senators Khan and Crowley. I am putting the link in the chat. So I'll ask that our competitors would go and vote, please. All right, y'all are making this interesting for me right from the beginning. We have a tie. So give me 1 second. I'm going to set up the poll again and we will re-vote. Okay, the link is there again. So go ahead and vote.
I'm parliamentarian. It was sent to me directly, just so you know. I just sent it to everyone in the chat.
Thank you. Sorry, I just saw that you had typed me a message and that's why it responded to you.
It's okay, not a problem.
Thank you.
Tab, it's a YouTube link. I don't.
I'll send it again. Hold on.
Here we go.
Oh, all right. We got it. Okay, friends, we are tied again. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tell us again why we should vote for you. And we'll just go in the same order, Senator Khan.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to make this quick because I've already told you everything I think you need to know. I've set a standard for fairness and equity in all of my rounds. And I believe that ultimately, because this round is about you, you won't even notice me if you elect me as your PO. I'm going to make this the best round of Congress that you've ever had, and that's a guarantee. So please vote for Senator Khan.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Isaac has said. I especially value equity. I've been involved in a lot of initiatives in my community to promote equity in this event. So I really do think it's a central pillar and something that I'll push for. And I have pushed for every time that I've PO'd. So yeah, really just equity is what I would add.
All right, friends, I am sending you the third poll. We will keep voting until we break the tie. Think about who it is they would like to serve you. I will tell you that one time Jesus literally broke the tie. I don't know that you can do that here because you can't write in Jesus, but that did happen once when we were really in person. Okay, congratulations to Senator Khan. I will turn it over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, Senator Khan. It is an honor to serve as your presiding officer today. Let's make this round the best one that we've ever had. So I'm just going to go over my procedures really quickly so that we're all on the same page. Time signals, because we have both final appeal speeches and regular speeches, it's going to be 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, 5 seconds left. For regular speeches, that means 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30, 2 minutes 55, which is standard NSDA. And for final appeals, that'll be 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute 25 seconds. For both, I'm going to give you a 10-second countdown once the time limit has been reached. So 10 seconds all the way for 3:10 for regular speeches and 1 minute 40 for regular speeches. For both questioning and cross-examination, I'm going to go based off of precedence and recency after using randomness first. And for cross-examination, my time signals will be a 1 at the camera at 20 seconds and a fist at 30 seconds, at which time I will verbally cut you off just to ensure that we keep things going and everyone has an equal amount of time to question. For amendments and points of personal privilege, I ask that you put those in the chat, but only do so in between speeches to respect everyone's time and to maintain decorum. And lastly, as a final reminder, the Yale equity team would like competitors to know that content warnings are necessary if any content or language in your speech is going to be uncomfortable, triggering, or emotionally difficult for someone to debate or judge. Let's keep today's debate professional and respectful. On that note, I'd like to open the floor for motions. Senator Wilkes.
Move to open the floor for agenda nominations.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your placards. All right. Do we have any agenda nominations on the floor? Senator Garagapati.
Move to nominate Agenda A, consisting of first, opt-in data privacy, and second, ransomware payments.
Are there any further nominations? Do I see a motion? Senator Payne.
I move to close the floor for agenda nominations.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your placards. All right, that's more than a majority. So by default, we will be going with docket A, which reads data privacy followed by ransom. Do any of the judges need me to put the legislation packet in the chat? Perfect. Seeing no motions on the floor, I'm unilaterally going to begin debate on a bill concerning data privacy. Do we have a sponsor? Senator Wilkes.
I thank the chair. Howdy, everybody.
Wilkes, Wilkes. Again, for pronunciation, the E is silent. Sponsoring a bill regarding data privacy. I'll give everybody a second. Is anybody not ready? I'll do that. Okay. That being said, I'll go ahead and get started. When incentives are misaligned, everything falls apart. We see it all the time. When students suffering create profit for lenders, when processed food saves money for manufacturers, even when catchy headlines get more clicks than quality journalism, almost every issue this country faces breaks down when someone makes money at the expense of others. But that's why we exist. The job of this Congress is to recognize those systems at their core and correct them before problems start to agglomerate. At the end of the day, that's all my legislation is. Companies make money from people's data, and today, we have a chance to correct that. So pass. First, I'd like to outline the issue we are currently facing. Right now, Americans are being tracked. That's right, you are being tracked. It doesn't matter if it's your smartphone, smartwatch, smart speaker, or even your smart refrigerator. But why? IT firm Anderson Technologies explains in 2019 that the intersection of AI and IoT means that their data being collected on users is processed and patterns are recognized. It's then sold off to third parties for a multitude of reasons, most prominently targeted advertising. Let's put it simply, the data-driven economy is a gold mine with tons of money to be made. The issue is, many of these companies aren't even asking for your consent. Tech lawyer Salar Atradan wrote in January of this year that these smart devices can be recording you or collecting personal data without your knowledge or consent. What's worse is companies are so shady about how they use your data that most consumers would say no if they were given the choice. Data from when Apple allowed opt-in on their devices in May of this year shows that when consumers get the option to opt out, only 15% ever opted in. Look at it this way. The incentives are misaligned. If a company asks for consent, they lose money. That's why so many of them don't even ask. Here's where we come in. Pass this bill to force companies to inform their consumers. Section 1 of this bill mandates that companies have to ask for your consent in an opt-in process. Now, tracking data isn't a given. If they want to make money, they have to convince users to raise that 15% number. And the impacts are clear. This new incentive system means that companies have every reason to be more transparent and more ethical, because if they want to make money, now they have to convince you to let them. Suddenly, terms of service becomes easier to read. Companies disclose where your data is going, all so they can convince you to let them use it. And this has already worked in the EU. Reed Smith Law Firm reports in July of last year that requiring opt-in consent caused individuals to be far more aware of their privacy rights, while also causing companies to employ far more rigorous data protection and compliance measures. This legislation is one small change in incentive, but one giant leap for America. So proud to pass.
Thank you for that speech of 2 minutes and 58 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Conda.
So under Section 1B, what is the punishment for violating this bill?
It's $2 million a month.
Okay, so for companies like Apple and Amazon, $2 million a month is like chump change. Is it really fair to be like specifically targeting medium and small businesses while allowing larger businesses to escape completely unscathed?
No, not necessarily, because small businesses don't collect much data. It's mainly the big companies that do.
Really? So like small AI companies don't collect any data?
I mean, not really. I mean, they do, but just like marginally less, right?
Marginally less, right? But then Apple and Amazon don't have to follow?
Again, I would encourage Senator Gargapati.
You're talking about how big tech is like abusing your data privacy rights, right?
Right, because they're not telling you what's going on.
So did big tech lose like a lot of their like revenues in the EU, like under the DMA when they had like implemented this opt-in policy?
Yeah, I think they saw 7.2% decrease in their stock price, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think
not just their stock price, but the revenue as a whole decreased by a lot, right?
Right. If it's punishing companies and because the companies are doing bad things, even
those companies also do. Those companies are more dimensional than just data stealing, right? Like they also do a lot of good when it comes to tech innovation. How are they going to
collapse? And you still have 2 more blocks. Senator Wu.
Following off that same line of questioning, we're talking about a lot of money, correct?
Like that companies?
Yeah, these companies would be losing probably towards billions, right?
Depending on the size of the company, sure.
Yeah, so what happens to all of the money that they could have had that they could have used to do other things?
I think in terms of weighing this financial argument, if a company is making money off of exploiting your personal information, I don't think that's money.
What about using that money to protect you?
Senator Kellery.
Thank you. So why do companies take my data in the first place? What do they want?
To make money off of it. So
exactly, right? So if I opt out of consumer service and now a company isn't getting my information, are they just going to stop and be like, oh, I don't have your info? Or are they going to try to find another way to get it?
I mean, if you don't tell them they can't have your info, they can't just snap.
Right, but that's specifically through a consumer opt-in service, right? I can still purchase someone's data from another company.
I mean, if you're not giving your data away because you opted out of the data.
But that happens specifically with smart services, right? There's still companies that create things like apps that aren't actually a smart device that companies.
Question time has elapsed. Speakers thanked and may return to mute. I'm now sending the link to my spreadsheet in the chat for you all to have access to. If you have any questions, you can just make a motion to ask me. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Jiang.
Thank you. This is Senator Jiang speaking for the first time today. If any of my judges are not ready, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll get started in a few seconds. Okay, awesome. British comedy drama Big Deal explores the life of a London gambler with a poker addiction. It seems like the affirmation is pretty into gambling as well, gambling away privacy information for our constituents. Yes, this legislation is a big deal in the wrong way. Fail for two reasons. First, because this legislation degrades the availability of information about data to consumers. And second, because the permanency of data is the bigger issue. The first reason why you fail today is because this legislation degrades the availability of information about data to consumers. US ENIX, in a 2018 research report, found that not all users of smart speakers are aware of privacy risks or underestimate the risks involved in using the technology. Information regarding privacy is already not readily available to consumers, and USA Today continues on June 20th of 2019 that generally developers say that data they collect helps their smart devices run better. The more data the system collects, the better it will understand and respond to you. Senator Wilkes told us himself that companies profit from data collection, but where he goes wrong is where this leads to more data collection. Under an opt-in system where consumers have to actively choose to participate in data collection practices, companies will then be incentivized to find ways to attract the consumer to opt in. This means that true information of what kind of data is collected wouldn't be as nearly as easy to access because of the fact that it could turn away consumers and data. Basically, when you pass, transparency of data goes down even further. But next, the permanency of data is the bigger issue. When the Proceedings on Privacy-Enhancing Technologies conducted a study in October of 2019, they found that many express dissatisfaction with the current retention policies. For over half of audio recordings, participants considered permanent storage unacceptable, despite that being the current default. It's the permanent storage, not the data collection, that really shakes the consumer. And that's true even if you delete the recordings on an Amazon Alexa, for example. Because CNET finds on May 9th of 2019 that Amazon lets you delete voice recordings, giving you a false sense of privacy. But the company still has that data, just not as a soundbite. It keeps the text logs of the transcribed audio on its cloud servers with no option for you to delete them. This kind of data shouldn't be permanent. Legislate that instead of wasting time debating between an opt-in and opt-out system. Overall, this legislation addresses the wrong problem, poses the wrong solution, and sends the wrong message to the public. Privacy is a big deal. This legislation belittles it.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Wilkes.
Hi, so you say that companies use your information to improve their products, right?
Right, so they need a lot of it.
Yeah, what's the impact of Google Home being able to recognize my voice better? Who really cares?
I mean, the point is that it's an intrusion on someone's privacy, and of course people are going to care about that, especially since most of the data is individually identifiable.
Okay, let's weigh this. People having a choice or having products that are maybe marginally better.
The idea, no, okay, so what you need to weigh is information.
Hi, so under this new system, why would people opt in if they know big tech is secretly storing their data permanently?
Because it's what they don't know.
Okay, right, but if we require them...
So the problem is that this legislation doesn't require privacy information. Therefore, the information would decrease because companies still need that profit margin.
Right, but they still have the option not to opt in. So why are they still going to?
Well, in the status quo, they have the option to opt out as well.
Right, but it's not as direct. Like, no one reads terms and conditions.
Senator Ziwu.
Thanks. So in the status quo, if I buy an Amazon Alexa, does Amazon presume that I consent into data collection?
Yes.
Okay. Under this bill, do they presume consent?
No.
Is presumed consent better than your worst case scenario, which is like less transparency?
So what I would say to that is that presumed consent promotes information transparency, while opt-in doesn't, because it encourage companies at the cost of privacy.
If we have
they're paying.
Hey, we have laws in place that force companies to be transparent about the data they collect, right?
Sure.
Do those laws change under this legislation?
No, but the problem is a company can do whatever they want to hide their privacy laws and privacy information. Consumers aren't getting that in the status quo.
You just told me that we have laws in place that forces companies to maintain transparency. If they break those laws, can we drag them to court?
Right, but they're not breaking the laws if that information is still available, just not easily accessible.
Questioning time has elapsed. Speaker is thanked and may return to mute.
Thank you.
All affirmative speakers, please raise your placard. Once again, calling for any affirmative speakers. I know we have them, and I don't want to break cycle. Thank you, Senator O'Neill.
I thank the chair. For the judges, that is Senator O'Neill. Speaking on the affirmation of this piece of legislation, I'm going to go ahead and take a verbal indication that you're not ready, but then other than that, I will begin. And for all reference, I will be timing myself on a separate device. Okay, doesn't sound like I hear any opposition, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. Amazon's Alexa is one of the most progressive systems we have in data privacy today. Watch how easy it is for consumers to control their data. Open the Alexa app, tap the 3 dots in the upper left corner, go to Settings, go to Alexa Account, go to Alexa Privacy, go to Manage how your data improves Alexa, then switch Help Develop No features to Off, then set the toggle under Use Messages to improve transcriptions to Off. Simple, right? Yeah, I didn't think so. Senators, today we have the power to stop this relentless battle to obtain privacy. Affirm. But first, the 4th Amendment states that people have the right to be secure in their possessions, houses, papers, and effects. Essentially, that you have the right to your privacy of personal information, therefore including all the information now stored on your device. So by our very foundations, this Congress is required to provide protective legislation like this. This only becomes more imperative when we look at the size of smart device companies and the companies that they sell data to. When single companies hold millions of dollars worth of data, it is like putting hackers in a candy store, hard to resist. For example, during the Facebook data breach in 2018, 50 million users' data were confirmed at risk after attackers exploited personal data, according to Facebook's own records. Smart devices like Apple products face the same risk, with there being over 1 billion iPhone users in 2020, according to The Verge. It is time we finally allow our constituents to decide for themselves if this is a risk they are willing to take by making an opt-in program. It is important that we correct Senator Jiang's false claims about consumer ignorance under this legislation. Nowhere in this legislation does it say that we're removing terms of service, something that is mandated under our very laws. We only gain back Americans' trust when we prove to them that we, the Congress, are working for their safety, not company profits. And that brings me to my second point. Pass today because businesses are not as opposed as the negation is going to make you think. In fact, companies are financially ready for this step. Allow me to clear up the concerns that the negation posed to Senator Wilkes in questioning. In the lead up to the GDPR, basically the EU's version of this legislation, PwC found that 68% of US companies surveyed plan to invest between $1 to $10 million in readiness and compliance efforts to provide data plans that people would be more inclined to accept if the United States were to pass something similar. Why were they so ready for change? Because while they know there are short-term negatives to no longer abundantly free data, they understand that smart data is optimal for the future. An analysis by top tech executives for the New York Times shares that if consumers are presented with clearer data privacy choices, consumers are likely to have higher lifetime value with that brand. Let me appease Senator Young's concerns about tailored content. Brands like Spotify and Chase are already utilizing opt-in programs to provide even more tailored content. Senators, a simple "Hey Alexa" has a wide array of implications for our constituents. Let's change that today. Affirm.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Once again, calling for any questioners, Senator Jiang.
Thank you. So companies have jurisdiction over like the websites and apps they create, right?
Of course.
Okay, so what stops them from underestimating their data collection on the initial homepage where you'd opt into the data?
What you ignore is that the terms of service are not going to go away. So they're going to have to outline all those effects. Maybe they understate them, but they're still going to show full transparency.
Okay, so when you open an app, do you read the terms of service?
Most people don't, but it's always there. Nobody's actually going to go and do research. The everyday American isn't going to go and do research, but we may indicate to them, hey, this is happening. Maybe you want to give them that choice.
Hey, Representative, so you want to curb smart tech being abused by like big companies like Apple and Amazon, correct?
Sure. Yeah, that's what my speech is.
Okay, so what is the enforcement mechanism for that?
Okay, so under this legislation, if these companies don't comply,
$2 million.
$2 million. Yeah.
Right. So $2 million is going to be stopping Amazon from complying with this legislation.
But when this legislation passed and the American people know, they're going to see that those very companies aren't complying and they're going to have less trust in them. So even if they're...
How would they know?
Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Gargapati.
I thank the chair. Speaking for the first time this session, that's Senator Gargipati, spelled Garigipati. I'm at the leisure of all those above me. Any indication when you're ready would be great. Okay, I think I see a thumbs up from anyone. Everyone good? Okay, I'm gonna get my timer set up and get started. In 1776, we promised every American the protection against unlawful search and seizure. It is 2021, and that right has been bought out by the world's leading tech corporations. Today, we don't just negate this legislation, we negate the doctrine that the right of privacy has a price tag. Principally, fail this bill to protect innovation. This bill would constrain one of big tech's biggest revenue sources. Reporting from the SEC in 2019 tells us that between 15 and 70% of Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple revenue comes from consumer data collection, and 20% of that revenue is spent on research and development, the backbone of innovation. When you pass, companies can't make nearly as much money off that venture because most people aren't going to opt in, like Senator Wilkes tells us. But that crushes those companies because Reuters in May of 2019 analyzed a similar program from the EU. It showed that in the first year, Google lost up to 90% of their AdSense revenue in European markets. Senator O'Neill, just because they're trying to survive doesn't mean this program is not debilitating them. But let me distance myself from Senator Jiang on my side. This program already works and companies cannot find a way around it. It is because it is so effective that you have to negate. When these companies can lose up to 90% of their most profitable revenue stream, they will be forced to cut back on the innovation that they spend so much money on. But why is that innovation so important? It's twofold. First, negate to protect consumer data security. So far, the affirmative has conflated privacy and security, but let's understand why security is so much more important. Big tech might violate data privacy when they store your data, but they use it to customize ads and news feeds. Moreover, though, they work to keep your data secure by protecting it from hackers who use it maliciously, either stealing your identity or abusing credit card info. A CB Insights report in 2020 found that 62% of new patent applications regarding cybersecurity and encryption came from Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon. Passing strips their ability to continue innovating these necessary technologies. Senator O'Neill, even if less data is stored, it's subject to more hacks. Senator Wilkes, I would rather have consumer data protected under Apple and Microsoft over a malicious hacker. The hacker that abuses your data isn't transparent. It's not exploitation, it's protection. No one should wake up knowing that their identity belongs to someone else. No one should have their financial assets in the hands of criminals. And no one in this round should be empowering those criminals. That's why you fail. But second, you negate to protect socioeconomic mobility. When companies innovate higher-end tech products, older and lower-end products become cheaper for less fortunate consumers. That technology is so important to joining and climbing our modernizing workforce. It's why a U.S. Chamber Foundation study in 2019 concludes that tech innovation is correlated to 52% of new job growth. The tech innovations from these high-end companies that we are strapping down under this legislation gives people a pathway to a better income and livelihood. Passing only hurts the companies that allow vulnerable Americans to stand up for themselves. Our Congress is supposed to stand for the values of security and empowerment for all of our constituents. Don't strip away those values. Protect them with your ballot instead. Negate.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator DeStefano.
Yeah, so when a company like Facebook uses its massive amount of resources to buy out a competitor and just absorb their product so it can't compete, is that an example of innovation?
No, but they do innovate like tech products and stuff.
Can you give me some examples of that, like where that's actually happening and they're not just
like when Apple comes out with like the iPhone 13, right? The iPhone 11 and everything became a lot cheaper. When those products become cheaper, like lower income consumers.
But you have to prove that that's unique to your side of the bill. Like Apple isn't doing a whole lot of data collection anyway.
I'm saying Apple cut like this.
Senator O'Neill
needs to make that innovation happen.
So if companies are going to see the losses that you outline, wouldn't that provide them even more incentive to create data collection that is safer so that consumers opt in?
They don't have the money to create safe data collection.
Okay, but as I stated in my speech, they actually do have the money. They've already planned on investing tens of millions of dollars.
They plan on investing so they can recoup the 90% they lost. That doesn't mean it's going to work.
Okay, but they're investing in data protection.
There's a reason all the innovation happens here and not in the EU, because the EU programs stop them from innovating.
Okay, but what I'm saying right now is that in the status quo, sure, they're going to...
Time has elapsed. Speakers think and may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Crowley.
Hi, everyone. That's Senator Crowley speaking for the first time in today's round. Any indication, I guess, if you're not ready would be great. Perfect. I'll go ahead and begin. 3 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of this Congress to rationalize why Facebook had abused the data of more than 70 million Americans. Today, this Congress is on trial because we have to justify letting big tech get too big to fail at the expense of our constituents. While big tech certainly hasn't failed, our support of opt-out policies has unequivocally failed the American people. Pass this bill for them. The first question we all need to ask is, given the choice, will individuals opt in? Senator Wilkes tells you that in a survey, only 15% of Americans said they would. But that's different from when people are actually presented with the choice in reality. Look at what happened in the EU when data collection was an opt-in implemented under the GDPR. Data-driven Thinker projected on July 6 of 2018 that as many as 90% of consumers covered by the GDPR regulation do not opt into data collection. Only 10% of consumers actually opt in. The result is that big tech cannot build these massive databases with data on you as well as their competitors. This is what I want to talk about. Data collection is fundamentally anti-competitive. Christopher Sean tells Electric Frontier Foundation on December 15th of 2020 that big smart tech companies collect data on smaller potential competitors, which they leverage to either drive them out of business or buy them out. Passing removes their massive databases, preventing them from levying such power over small tech. Senator Gargapati, I'm okay with crushing big tech's revenue because you make small tech more competitive. The impact of empowering small tech is twofold. First, you create many more jobs than exist in the status quo. Senator Gargapati says that big tech leads to more jobs. Let's look at what they're actually doing in our communities. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance finds in 2015 that Amazon employs less than half as many workers as the local businesses that they push out. When you do not have to compete, you don't need as many workers. That's why a truly competitive tech industry would have 18% more jobs. That's what you're passing for today. But the second impact is more innovation. Senator Gargapati, you tell us that big tech leads to more innovation, so we shouldn't hurt them. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Why? Big tech doesn't actually innovate. They know what sells, so they modify different versions of the same product instead of bringing new ones to the market. Small startups, by contrast, are forced to innovate, or else they don't get investment. A 2019 McKinsey study found that small tech develops an average of 12 truly groundbreaking technologies per year, but they never get a chance to reach the market because they can't compete with big tech. The impact of innovation extends far beyond the economy. It means the development of more accurate crime-fighting algorithms or new medical innovations that save lives. Today, we're testifying, but ultimately, no one can justify watching as jobs evaporate and life-saving tech disappears. This is about more than protecting data. It's about protecting lives and livelihoods. We've failed the Americans for too long. Pass this bill.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 15 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Gargapati.
Who's pioneering cybersecurity innovation, big tech or small tech?
I would argue it's small tech because to build a consumer base, they have to protect people's data privacy.
I told you 5 companies hold 62% of all new patent applications. How in any way can small tech be like?
They can't compete to get these patents in the first place because they're bought out or driven out of business before they can even bring them to the market. That's what I'm telling you.
Didn't the small company make the patent and then the big company buys it? Like it's
no,
the
because
big
they're bought out first. Like in order to keep consumers and compete with these big companies, small tech is the ones that have to protect privacy.
Can you please explain how today's legislation bolsters these small companies when these larger companies have more money to invest in getting people to opt in?
Yeah, okay, so I think they both can get people to opt in, and like the American public is going to decide that for themselves.
What ultimately makes small businesses see better returns?
I mean, there's a number of things, but the problem right now is that they have limited options because they're driven out of business.
You based your entire speech on this, but you haven't provided an exact way that this legislation is going to do that, can you?
What do you mean? Big tech loses money. They're less competitive. You empower small
may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Chellery, unopposed.
Hi, everyone. That's Senator Chellery. Can everyone hear me okay? Just to make sure. Perfect. That's spelled Chellury. My judges are scattered all over the screen. So for the sake of simplicity, go ahead and let me know if you're not ready. Otherwise, I'll get started as soon as I pull up the time. Great. Everyone looks good. Digital data privacy is one of the most critical aspects of our consumers' right to independence. The fundamental truth is that no American should have to worry about a company's access to their data or any random individual's access to their personal information. But at the point at which the affirmation is misguided by those notions and rather chooses to pass a piece of flawed legislation, it becomes critical you stand with me in the negation. I'm going to spend the next 3 minutes framing my speech on exactly what companies do after you affirm this piece of legislation. I want to start off today's debate by addressing Senator Wilkes. He tries to tell you that when you pass today's piece of legislation, companies aren't going to have access to your data. I'll agree with him on one thing. He's exactly right. Companies do get money off of collecting an individual's data. In fact, let's quantify that, because the Brookings Institution in 2018 explains that companies like Apple and Google make the vast majority of their profits using targeted advertisements by either purchasing or selling data from other companies. They then use that data to target advertisements towards specific consumers. The vast basis for the profit for most of these companies is targeted advertising and consumer data. Here's the problem with that. That doesn't go away for every company when you pass this piece of legislation. Under Section 1, today's piece of legislation only applies to companies creating smart devices, things like Apple and Samsung who create smartwatches and smartphones. The issue is, today's legislation places no restrictions on apps like social media platforms who collect data just as much as technical providers do. Here's why that's so problematic, Senators Wilkes and O'Neill. Because Forbes in October 2020 explains that social media companies collect data just as much, if not more, than actual tech companies do. The issue is they hide it in things like a terms of conditions that, let's be honest, no one who's downloading the app actually reads. At that point, social media consumers, social media platforms can collect data off individuals with no restrictions unto this point of legislation. So what does that actually mean in the context of today's round? Senator Wilkes and I both agreed in questioning that companies aren't going to just stop when you pass this piece of legislation. They're going to try to find more ways to get data. So for those big tech companies, the only remaining option is to go to social media platforms and purchase that data. However, the Harvard Business Review in December of 2020 explains why that's so problematic, because it's nearly insanely more difficult to regulate data sales between companies than it is to regulate the specific data collection of one platform. That's because the vast majority of those data sales happen through terms of conditions, which again, no one wants to read. At that point, companies are masquerading these data sales within the terms of conditions. Consumers are getting their data traded between companies, and they have no idea about it. In fact, USA Today in January of 2021 quantifies for us in a poll that 91% of Americans, when faced with a terms of conditions, skip past it, just accept it, and move on. Here's what that means, though. Senator O'Neill and Crowley's impacts are all contingent on Americans opting out, which doesn't happen when things are disguised in a terms of condition. And Senator Wilkes' impacts are based on companies not getting data, which happens regardless. When you affirm, you push data collection into a method that's way harder to regulate, and companies still have access to data just at the expense of Americans. You failed today's piece of legislation because you stand with your people.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 11 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. First, Senator Wilkes.
Whenever we pass policy, we send a message to companies, investors, and everyone in between, right?
I mean, sure.
So why would companies keep trying to find loopholes rather than just conceding to the policy and exiting the data selling market?
I mean, you answered that question yourself when you said that companies want money, right? If they want profit, they're going to find
If they want money, why don't they just change their business model now to where they don't need the data, then keep trying to bypass our policy?
Okay, changing your business model when your entire company is based off targeted advertising means a huge reduction in profit.
Companies like Google, their entire model is not off of data.
A large portion of their profit is.
Hi, so how does Section 2 actually define smart devices?
I'm sure you can tell me.
Yeah, so it's defined as voice assistants that operate as a standalone device or is connected to another device like a cell phone. So why wouldn't apps like Instagram or Facebook be considered a voice assistant?
Those are voice assistants. There's a lot of social media platforms and a lot of apps that collect data, not like using voice assistant, just off of like.
Can you give me an example of a social media that doesn't have a voice assistant, like messaging through verbal?
So it's not just social media platforms. It's a variety of apps and a variety of different companies.
Question time has elapsed. Speakers think they may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placard. Senator DeStefano, unopposed.
I thank the chair for my judges parley MPO, that is Senator DeStefano, speaking on the affirmation of this legislation. As always, I'm at all of your leisure, so just any indication that any of you are not ready for me to get started, and I'm happy to wait. I think it's important, even this many cycles into today's debate, to really go line by line through what has been said so far on the negation and understand that the majority of their points fall flat on balance. So first, let's start off with how Senator Jiang opened the round. She said that passing today's legislation would degrade availability about the information available on data. She says that not all users understand the privacy of their devices and that data collected lets devices work better, which companies are going to prioritize showing to consumers. Here's the thing, it's not actually a bad thing. Any legislation that facilitates communication between companies that want data and consumers that have the option to give it out is good. She furthers, consumers really dislike permanent data, and we should focus on that. We actually focus on that anyway, because if a company is going to be permanently holding data, that has to be disclosed in their opt-in or at least in their terms and conditions. So we are giving them the option to keep their data from being permanently retained. But don't take it from me. Turn to the International Association of Privacy Professionals, where they compare different opt-in and opt-out plans in the United States and across the globe. They find that opt-in plans across the board increase transparency for consumers over their opt-out counterparts and are seen as more consumer-friendly and create better data practices in the long term. See that the argument on the negation simply falls flat. But then let's talk about Senator Garigapati. He says that we crush innovation by removing it, and he champions the size of these companies. Now, Senator Crowley has already talked about how the innovation argument just doesn't track. So instead, let's talk about what these companies are actually using with their size, because it's not good. Jasper Jolly on February 6, 2021, for The Guardian, explains that Google has now become the largest political lobbyer in the country, passing Goldman Sachs. Facebook is changing its algorithm to silence negative reporting on the platform. And Amazon is raising the prices of goods on its website in order to make sure that after it drives out competitors, consumers are paying even more for goods that would have been cheaper before. None of this sounds like good things for consumers. When we allow these companies to get too big, we allow them to influence our democracy and our political process. We allow them to destroy negative reporting, and we allow them to raise prices on our consumers. So tell me, Senator Garagapati, how is any of that actually good for consumers? The burden is on the negation to prove any net harm from passing this legislation. Either they show us that companies are going to somehow become more invasive when we pass, or they show us that consumers are going to get the worst end of the stick. But given what they've shown so far, we pass.
Thank you for that speech of 2 minutes and 49 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Gargapati. Senator Jiang.
Sorry, thank you. So data is important to companies, right?
Sure.
Okay, and can companies afford to collect less data if it's so important to them?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, obviously they'll see a hit to profit, but if that's at the expense of better consumer protection, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so what exactly in this legislation would force companies to collect less, to choose to collect less data rather than?
Well, they don't choose to collect less data, but if they offer an opt-in option and the majority of people opt out, like has been proven by other affirmation speakers, then they're going to be collecting less data.
Kaiser Permanente makes hospitals that are really important for a lot of people, right?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I had a bit of a cutout.
Kaiser Permanente makes a lot of hospitals that are important to a lot of people, right?
Yes.
But they also lobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if big tech companies also lobby, but they also innovate to help people join the workforce.
But you haven't actually shown innovation, because Senator Crowley destroyed the innovation argument, and then I showed that these companies are actually using their position to raise prices on consumers. You're not showing what you say you are.
I told you they spend 20% of their revenue on innovation. How is that like?
Your time has elapsed. Speakers thanked and may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Kondo.
I thank the chair. This is Senator Kondo, spelled the same way you see it on the screen. If you guys are not ready, go ahead and let me know, just to make sure that PO, this is the negation, right? Okay, cool. Looks like everybody's ready, so I'll go ahead and start. The right to privacy isn't one this Congress should be taking lightly. I'll agree. But even more central to the United States Constitution is the idea that financial ability should determine a right to live. Our country is built on finding new ways to solve old problems. Unfortunately, this bill finds new ways to create new problems. That's why you fail. But primarily, I want to lay down the framework of this round hinges on innovation. Obviously, we should be prioritizing consumer rights, but it should not be coming out of their wallets. It's under this framework that you fail this bill. So first, let's focus on the mechanistics of today's debate. The main enforcement mechanism of this legislation is Section 1B, which Senator Wilkes conveniently leaves out. It imposes a $2 million fine every month that unauthorized data collection is used. That fine, however, is far too low. The New York Times explains to us that in a single quarter, Apple made approximately $27 billion in profit. A $2 million fine is just 0.0007% of Apple's total profit. This isn't a fine for big companies. It's just a small complication. Representative Wilkes O'Neill, your example about Google and Apple literally do not matter in the context of today's debate. Instead, you disproportionately hurt smaller companies. Deloitte Business explains to us that small tech companies present dramatic upside for the United States in terms of innovation, with revenue growths over previous years that were nearly 4 times as high as large cap companies, primarily because of innovation. In order to succeed, however, these companies need to have an even playing field. This legislation just destroys the playing field altogether. Small startups are forced to comply with this legislation because they can't pay the fine, while large companies can pay it and therefore don't comply. let's concede to the affirmation here. This bill does curb the data usage of companies, but not all companies, just small cap companies. Representative Crowley and De Stefano, that actually increases monopolization. Small businesses can no longer compete with their large company counterparts who have way more access to data and thus power. Small companies start to shut down, or like Representative Crowley suggests, they're just bought out. Why is that the most important point brought up in today's debate? Here's what I want to distance myself from Representative Gargapati. Large companies are not the solution to innovation. He cites the iPhone 13 as a beacon of innovation. Have you seen the iPhone 13? They got an intern to just copy paste the iPhone 12. No, instead, it's small businesses. I already explained how these businesses promote innovation. However, this legislation decreases innovation by creating more monopolization. President Crowley, your impacts flip to the negation. The U.S. Chamber Foundation actually reminds you, economists have calculated that approximately 50% of U.S. annual GDP growth is attributed towards innovation. In the middle of a pandemic, I say we support our citizens' paycheck and make sure they aren't going broke before we focus on semantic arguments. That's why on an economic scale, the negation outweighs the affirmation because we minimize human suffering. Let's consider the cost of that suffering. Cold winters without heat and hungry summers without food. It's not a scenario I want to pass. That's why you fail.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Ziwu.
Thanks. Do I make any money if Amazon or Google or Facebook, quote unquote, innovates?
No. Who do you mean? Like, who are you in this situation? I'm a little bit confused.
Zach, do I make any money?
So as a consumer, you do not make any money because
okay. So a firm can steal my data and make money off of it, presuming that I'm okay with that. And
I'm saying they're still going to do it in either world, so it doesn't matter.
But why not make the consumer say yes?
Senator Jay Wu.
They can. They're just not going to comply.
Senator Jay Wu.
Hi, Senator Kondo. So I'm a little bit confused. Right now, Facebook, Apple, and Google make up this giant market share, right?
Right, absolutely.
You would consider them a monopoly, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But we don't want to further monopolize it.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused. Facebook, Google, and Apple literally use data to bully other companies out of the market because they have a giant amount.
This legislation increases that because these companies won't be giving the option in the first place because they can just break this law.
Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. Just a note, if you're trying to ask a question, if you can get your placard up just a little bit quicker, it helps me recognize you and accurately keep precedence and recency. That being said, all affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Payne.
Thank you. Can everyone see and hear me okay? Is that a yes? Okay, great. This is Representative Pang, or Senator Pang, spelled P-A-N-G, speaking for the first time today at the leisure of all. If I could just get any signal from my judges. Great. On February 14th of 2013, then President Obama had a very private meeting with several big tech lobbyists, dedicating hours of Valentine's Day to them and giving new meaning to the term domestic affairs. Time and time again, our love for big tech quite literally crosses the line. When we pass this legislation, we very firmly draw it back again. Stand with me in the affirmation. First, because you increase security by decreasing the power of big tech. Senator Crowley, in the beginning of this debate, tells you the impact of slowing down big tech, and Senator O'Neill tells you about the danger of hackers. I want to combine those two arguments to really sell the affirmation here today. The Sedona Conference Journal in 2019 finds that Yahoo, back in 2013, after expanding their corporation and buying a series of smaller companies because they were such a big tech company, couldn't handle all of the data that they had to now control, leading to 1 billion consumers having their data hacked. And while this idea of identity theft has been thrown out in this round, not a single debater has actually quantified the real impact. So allow me to give you the substantial evidence. A report by the Identity Theft Resource Center in 2017 found that after identity theft, almost 30% of Americans who were targeted by those attacks ended up going into debt over it. Don't force our own Americans to pay the cost of corporations not protecting their data. Passing this legislation ensures that they're protected with their own choices. But now, allow me to address some of the major misconceptions made on the side of the negation. Let's start off with Senator Conta, who argues against the solvency of the affirmation, saying that big companies aren't going to pay the $2 fine, or if they do, it's not going to take out of their profits. He mischaracterizes the solvency of this bill because it isn't $2 million per company if they have an infraction. It's $2 million per infraction. That means every single time a company violates this legislation, they have to pay $2 million. Considering their vast amount of consumers, that racks up to the billions. Then Senator Wu, during questioning, asks if these companies are going to lose money, but he concedes the amount of money lost depends on the size of the company. That means that large, monopolizing companies lose big, while small companies can finally compete against them. Then, Senator Zhang argues that companies are going to decrease transparency. But if consumers don't even know that they're being tracked, they don't know that that data exists, they're not even going to check it. There's no real impact of decreasing transparency. But even if you don't believe that, we still have laws in place to maintain transparency in the first place. You don't see any for impacts materialize. Finally, let's talk about Senator Shellery, who argues that these companies are going to start buying from social media. Social media counts under this legislation because it's connected to a smart device, not like my local mailbox. Don't be infatuated with big tech's promise. Pass this legislation.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 11 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Kondo.
Hey, representatives, let me just read section 1B. Companies that fail to do so will be fined $2 million per month until an opt-in option is provided. Where does this say it's a per consumer basis?
Okay, right. $2 million per month is still like a ton, right? Because they're not just going to like...
No, it's not. It's 0.0007% of Apple's revenue.
Right. That racks up over time. And even if you like...
No, it doesn't.
It does, right?
It really does not.
Okay, no. If you don't buy my argument there, we can just raise the fine if it's still not enough of an...
I'm not talking about your other arguments. I'm talking about the argument in your second point.
Thank you. You said we have laws in place to like improve transparency between companies and consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if that's true, why is transparency so bad right now?
Because we haven't been regulating it.
Exactly, right? And when you pass today's piece of legislation, those companies, like social media companies, can still continue to take that data. What changes?
No, if the root of the problem is that we're not regulating it, then we as Congress just need to pass more regulation.
What does this legislation do to improve transparency if social media companies can still buy and sell data?
It doesn't need to be just this piece of legislation. As Congress, we can easily just pass future legislation.
But that's like your entire
time has elapsed. Speakers think they may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placard. Once again, calling for any negative speakers.
Motion.
State that motion.
Can we have a quick 2-minute recess?
I would prefer order. Would 30 seconds do?
I would prefer 2 minutes.
All right. Is there a second to the 2-minute motion? Since there's no second, Senator O'Neill, is that a second? All right. Since there was a second, we will vote. All those who wish to pass, please raise your placard. All right. Clearly not enough. Is there another motion on the floor, or are we proceeding with speeches? Senator Gargapati?
Move for a 30-second in-house recess.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Granted.
So, Senator Wu, did you want the 2 minutes to give the next speech?
Yeah, like, honestly, it's just me and Zach left. I would honestly prefer that we keep the cycle moving the way it is and not break cycle. So,
John, are you going to give the neg or the F?
I guess I'll give the neg.
Okay.
Zach, what do you have?
Sounds good. I was just going to give the last speech.
I think your judges would prefer if debate continued rather than taking recess in the middle. So I think it's better to break cycle and then just have Senator J.
All right, we can do that. That's fine.
John, how much time do you need?
Recess is elapsed.
Cycle is good enough.
Okay.
Recess is elapsed, so I'm going to continue. Everyone with an affirmative speech, with a negative speech, just to call again, please raise your... All right. Seeing none, all affirmative speakers. Senator Ziwu.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's Senator Zach Wu, first time today. Last name W, 2 letters. I'm on the affirmative. I believe I'm the last affirmative. Any indication from my judges when they're ready would be fantastic. Good. Okay. Let me get a timer and let's do this. I work at Facebook. Senator O'Neill works for Apple. Senator Crowley works for Google. It's pretty insane how my entire side is an employee of Silicon Valley. But unfortunately, none of us get paid for our labor, and none of us got signed a contract agreeing to do our jobs either. Yet all the same, our labor is existentially integral to the survival of the corporations that employ us. But I am no software engineer. In fact, I barely got an A in Computer Programming 101. I'm not a data scientist either. I'm not even Mark Zuckerberg's doorman. But my personal data makes Facebook more money than any of those. I'd like to fundamentally reframe what this piece of legislation is about. For the entire debate, we have treated data like abstract ones and zeros. That is not reality. I am asking you to affirm the basic principle that our data is ours. Unless you're in witness protection, your identity will always be yours. And therein lies the problem with the way we do business. We assume that consumers are always okay with their property being taken. I'm going to make this debate super simple. First, most importantly, even if nothing else, you don't buy any of the offense from my side. You pass this bill to stop the presumption of consent. Like Senator John agreed in examination, the default right now is to opt out. The burden is on consumers to exercise their rights. This is the bottom line of my side, that the negative is just cold conceded. Instead, they choose to dance around the fringes and make arguments about why data is important for companies' profit. But none of these arguments are responsive to the fundamental question of why we're allowed to just assume consumers are okay with their data being taken. Senator Konda, the framework of this debate has nothing to do with innovation. It has to do with consent. It has to do with your literal rights. Let's not get it twisted. But second, Senator Gargapati, I think it's ironic that you don't want people waking up with their identity belonging to others, because that is the status quo. Companies take your data, own your data, and then profit off of your data. That data is capital for corporations. It enriches them. Meaning, Senator Chellary, the worst case scenario is that consumers don't read terms of service and still opt in. That's tough. Nothing changes. But here's the best case. If I concede that less people are opting in, it means that companies like Amazon need to provide stronger incentives to do so. The 2017 Information Tech and Innovation Foundation writes that a company has to provide incentives for users to opt in, wherein only individuals who value their data less than the company would do so. Meaning, you give every single consumer of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google autonomy and control over their own property. Senator Wilkes told you data collection is a goldmine. I will tell you, this policy is Goldilocks. If a company truly wants to preserve its current business model, they need to change the way that they treat our basic rights. Please pass.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Gargapati.
When big tech uses your data, they use it to like customize your ads, customize your news feeds, things like that, right?
They can also sell your data to advertisers and other businesses.
Yeah, but the ultimate thing is like ads and news feeds, right?
The ultimate thing is that Facebook and Google make money off of my data and your data.
Yeah, so let's say it's not in the hands of Facebook and Google. It's instead in the hands of instead it's being hacked relentlessly because the cybersecurity is just no longer there. The hacker is going to make more money using it maliciously and draining your bank account, right? With your credit card info that they steal.
Senator Konda.
Representative, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the framework of this legislation. So you say it's not innovation. Does that mean that we should just be giving consumers increased freedom at the risk of their own wallets?
You saying the basic framework is innovation? I'm telling you, rights are at stake.
Right.
I'm telling you, in the status quo.
Right, but are there not ways to give consumers more rights that don't involve taking dollars from their pocket?
I think they should. If I stole your pet dog from you, you would want
time is elapsed. Speaker is saying
consumers?
You.
Yes.
All negative speakers, please raise your placard. Senator Jay Wu.
Hello, everyone. I am Senator Wu. Jay Wu specifically speaking for the first time this session. Judges, please do note it is J, not Z. We are speaking back to back. I know it can be a little bit confusing. I will take silence as an indication that everyone is ready. Otherwise, I will begin. America has touted itself to the world as the land of the free, the place where the American dream is possible. But all of that is because that we've been actually able to dream and to innovate. You fail today's legislation because it fails to protect innovation right now. This entire debate has revolved around two key points: innovation and privacy. Let's see why the negation wins on innovation and how the affirmation fails to win on privacy. First, The Wired explains in March of 2018 why data is so important to corporations, showing that data collection makes up to 60% of all corporations and entities' revenue. That means that corporations will do whatever they can to keep collecting data. But what happens when only 15% of people opt in that Senator Wilkes talks about? Vox on January 29th, 2020 explains that free software is necessary to have ads, and it also comes with data collection. Free web services and apps collect loads of data about their users so that the fee to use this service doesn't have to be paid by the consumer. In layman's terms, once you remove this revenue source from Apple, from Facebook, and all of these other companies that the affirmation claims will happen, you now force these companies to charge for their products. Why does that become such a big problem? The US Chamber of Commerce on July 29th, 2020 explains that 84% of small enterprises are using at least one major digital platform to provide information to customers. 80% are using at least one major platform to show products and services as well as to advertise. Let's take the affirmative at their highest ground, Senator Crowley. Your argument on innovation falls completely flat when these small businesses need Amazon, Google, and Apple to exist. When these companies are taxed and their revenue is slashed, they are going to go to these small businesses and demand additional money. They are going to charge these companies, thus hurting the innovation that you so dearly want. But then, let's move on to this entire point about innovation. Representative Zach Wu talks about how today we need to protect people's privacy. I contend that it doesn't exist no matter what. A CB Insights study in 2017 found that 62% of new patent applications regarding cybersecurity and encryption came from Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. Basically, right now, we need these big tech companies to protect people's security and privacy, as Senator Gargapati talked about. Whether you pass or fail today's legislation, you pick one of two poisons. Either A, you allow consumer data to be hacked, or B, you at least offer the chance that all of this data doesn't end up in the hands of hackers rather just third parties. I contend third parties are significantly better than hackers that can scam you. At the end of the day, the only arguments that hold weight is innovation. Don't pass today's legislation and turn the American dream into the American nightmare.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator O'Neill.
Okay, so in Europe, have people opted out in majority numbers?
Sure.
Okay, well, they haven't. They've continued to opt in because they still want tailored data, and companies have been more incentivized to create safer data plans, right?
I believe that Senator Wilkes talked about 15%, so I don't believe that's true.
Okay, but that was a hypothetical for the United States, but that wasn't when they actually implemented the legislation. We're talking about the European Union where this has actually been put into effect. Do we see any of the negative effects that you just outlined?
I would say that Google has lost, I believe...
Senator DeStefano.
So let's be clear, the 15% is with current data policies, that's how many people would opt in. Don't we, when we pass the incentivize companies to come up with ways to make consumers let their data be collected?
Sure, I would argue that would still take time, first of all, and second of all, that's not a guarantee.
And it'll take different forms, right? Like either they're going to be more private about it, or they could even, on the other end, like pay consumers. But isn't that always good for consumers?
That would hurt transparency. I contend that being transparent about where your data is...
How would it hurt transparency if there has to be good communication?
And they return to mute. Are there any motions on the floor? Senator Wilkes.
Move to previous question.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your placards. All right, that's unanimous. We will be moving to the previous question, but before we vote, Senator Wilkes has his final appeal. Just a reminder for the judges, this speech doesn't count for precedence or recency. It's rather like an extension of the authorship. Again, time signals, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute 25.
I thank the chair. Hello, everybody. Wilkes again, technically second time today. I started this debate, now I'm going to finish it. Let me know if any of you are not ready. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. The second the negation started defending corporations over their constituents is the second they lost this debate. I'm not kidding. Basically every argument from the negation is some way that this bill hurts businesses. Right off the bat, you should know that the people who don't have a choice right now should come before these companies. But nonetheless, at the negation's highest ground, here are 3 reasons why the affirmation still outweighs. First, companies can adapt to this legislation. Senator O'Neill told you that when the EU passed a similar policy, companies invested money to comply. But on top of that, the industry of data collection will dramatically go down if it's less profitable. Companies will eventually have to pivot. Second, the people who don't have a choice are the ones this Congress should protect. Senator Gargapati, if the only way Google can innovate is by lying and exploiting our constituents, then so be it. That's not the type of innovation I want to create my policy around. If I take apart your house and then sell the bricks to my friend, that is not innovation this Congress should stand by. Third, big companies losing money is actually a good thing. Senator Crowley told you that these companies are the ones shutting out small businesses from the market. That doesn't sound like a business model this Congress should support. Senator Conda, no company wants to openly violate a federal law. The optics are too bad for any company to do so. For the past hour, the negation has given you excuses after excuses. But just know, the American people will never forgive a negative vote.
Thank you for that final appeal of 1 minute and 32 seconds. There is no cross-examination, so we will move directly to voting. All those who wish to pass, please raise your placards and keep them high. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes for the negation, for the affirmation. All those who wish to fail, please raise your placards and keep them up. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And any abstentions? There should be none. On a vote of 6 to 5 to 0, this legislation does pass. My congratulations to Senator Wilkes. Senator Payne.
Seeing a natural break in debate, I move to a 10-minute recess.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your placards. All right, clearly more than a half, so we will be moving to a 10-minute recess. Please be back here by 3:58 p.m. Eastern Time.
Before everyone leaves, do y'all want to take splits like one more time to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen that happened just now? Cool. So like, sorry?
You have a sponsor now, right?
Yeah, I have the sponsor ready.
Okay, so AFs. 1, 2, 3. How do we get 4?
I can do an F. I'm able to go both ways.
Okay, we should be good then.
Sorry, was there 5 Fs or 6 Fs?
5.
Okay.
Pio, I'm gonna go grab a drink of water. So if the time expires before I come back, you can go ahead and begin. I'll just come.
All right, no worries. We still have 3 minutes, so should be
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, we have about 1 minute left in our recess, so if everyone could start turning on their cameras and coming back so we can start on time, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, it's 3:59 and the recess has officially elapsed. I'm going to go ahead and unilaterally open debate on our next bill concerning ransomware. Do we have a sponsor present? Senator Peng, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can everyone see and hear me okay? Fantastic. This is Senator Peng, P-A-N-G, speaking for the last time today at the leisure of all. If I could just get any signal when you guys are ready. Great. Awesome. It strikes me as fitting that one of the most common types of ransomware attacks is known as the Trojan horse, because just like a Trojan horse, there's far more to this legislation than what meets the eye. The only difference is that this time it isn't a trap. So first, allow me to contextualize the problem that my legislation solves. Whenever companies pay ransomware, they lose so much more than just their data. Cybersecurity firm Sophos finds in their 2020 global survey that paying ransom for data decryption after a ransomware attack is far more expensive. The research found that the total cost of recovery from a ransomware attack almost doubles when organizations pay ransom to cybercriminals, especially since they don't always get their data back at all. The average cost of addressing the impact of ransomware attacks was more than $730,000. However, the average cost increased to $1.4 million whenever organizations did agree to pay the ransom, and the impact is already being seen. A global study of over 1,300 security professionals found that 53% of organizations' brand and reputation were damaged in a successful attack where they did end up paying the criminals. 29% of employees were laid off due to the financial pressures following a ransomware attack, and 26% of all organizations targeted were forced to close down operations entirely. When we pass my legislation, we don't just save important companies, but also our own constituents whose only source of stable income relies on them. Don't leave our people vulnerable and defenseless. Here's how my legislation finally protects them. Section 1 prohibits organizations and public entities from making payments at all following these ransomware attacks. That means that not only do companies save money when they don't have to pay a far more expensive ransom and lay off their workers, we stop attacks from happening at all. Brett Callow, a threat analyst from the antivirus firm NCSoft, found that prohibiting ransomware payments is the quickest and most effective way to end ransomware attacks because they only happen for one reason and one reason only, to make profit. If they can't get paid, attacks stop before they even ever happen. And the best part is that we don't even need to worry about lost data. The Chief Information Security Officer found that companies don't need to pay back the ransom in order to receive their information. More than half of the IT managers surveyed, specifically 56%, claimed that they were able to recover their data from backups without paying the ransom at all. Any argument the negation will come up with will be the real Trojan horse. Pass my legislation, don't fall for their trap.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Wilkes.
So if companies are banned from paying ransom, why don't they just not tell the government when they get hacked?
Right. So here's the thing, right? Most of the time, whenever companies pay ransom, they end up shelling out a lot more than it would take to just recover the data on their own. So they have no incentive to hide it from us. They just don't make the ransomware payment.
Wait, if they're paying it now, then why won't they just continue and not tell the government? Like, what difference does it make?
Right. So a lot of the time, these companies feel the need to pay back ransomwares because they simply...
Thank you. Is ransom legal?
It's not.
Okay, so people who commit ransomware attacks, they're breaking the law, right?
Right.
Okay, so what makes a law we pass? Why would they follow that and stop ransomware attacks?
Yeah, I'm not saying that this legislation makes ransomware illegal. It already is illegal. It makes payments illegal. So if these criminals are no longer getting paid, they have no incentive to attack in the first place.
But how does it stop attacks if these people are breaking the law to begin with?
Out.
Thanks. So in the status quo per our existing statutes, regulations, and rulings, is there anybody in the United States who is prohibited from making a ransom payment?
In the status quo?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, financial institutions, banks, people who are subject to regulation can't do that because they're subject to the US government, right? Why are we extending this to private citizens?
Okay, we extend this to private citizens because they also lose a ton of money, especially since private citizens aren't always given like the information that the government has. So they don't know.
Hey, Representative. So let's say ransomware people hold a infrastructure of a hospital hostage. Do you just let everybody in that hospital that's on life support just kind of die?
No. First of all, it's not like you need data to keep an ICU running, right? So
what if they hack the power grid? So you need power to run an ICU grid, right?
Yeah, but they can still receive power in other ways. It's not like there's only.
So if you hack a power grid, how are you receiving power for your ICU?
Because you can still, well, first they have energy stored up.
That's an assumption you make.
Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Once again, calling. Thank you, Senator Conda.
Sorry. This is for the second time in today's round. Representative Conda, like we will be last time, I'm speaking on the first negation on this item. So hopefully I can add a little bit of fuego into this round. For those of you who don't know, that's Spanish for fire. Don't want you guys to assume anything, but I'll just go ahead and get started if I don't hear any thing from the judges. Okay, looks like we're all good. I find cybersecurity to be a perplexing topic. We've placed an increasing amount of emphasis on the techie side of things. Despite that, somehow, the only thing standing between hackers and my bank account is the name of my now deceased goldfish that I had about 10 years ago. However, as hackers become more adept, things like secret questions, among other cybersecurities, are becoming more outdated. It is because ransomware serves as the pinnacle of that ladder that you failed today's legislation. First, let's reevaluate today's round. What is the real problem that causes ransomware? Representative Payne explains that the cause of ransomware attacks is just paying ransom. But that's not necessarily true. The only reason criminals can engage in ransomware attacks is that the cybersecurity is weak enough to conduct the attacks in the first place. The Brookings Institution actually corroborates that. They explain that in the status quo, American companies have lackluster cybersecurity systems, and the federal government doesn't even have a clear response protocol towards those ransom attacks. In fact, the US doesn't even have a place in our legal system to report the ransom attacks in the first place. But the problem actually gets worse, because not just the fact that these companies and governments are unwilling to provide these cyber technology improvements, it's that they literally cannot. Security Magazine again explains to us, most ransomware attacks happen small and medium businesses and governments, which don't have the resources to bolster their cybersecurity. Those endemic problems don't go away under this legislation. They persist as a result of our negligence. Senator Payne, you and I can author a bill to fix our cybersecurity, but passing this bill before doing that is detrimental, because unless those systemic problems are addressed, a ban does nothing at all. If ransomware payments were banned, it's difficult to imagine such a law would actually be enforced or followed. Let's imagine it. Would prosecutors really seek to imprison hospital executives or trucking companies for paying off criminals in order to save lives and transport food? The answer is clearly no. When people are in a desperate situation, banning their only way out of the situation doesn't stop them from using it. It only makes the cost of doing so higher and the victims more vulnerable. For example, banning illegal migration into this country doesn't stop migration, it just creates more border turmoil. The same principle applies to things like drug usage and medical procedures. Thus, this legislation doesn't solve the underlying issue of ransomware, it just increases the burden of it on American businesses by creating more legal and financial issues for people who actually use ransomware attacks. More specifically, the Pew Research Center explains to us that banning ransomware payments means local governments and small businesses will not be able to restore or rebuild their computer networks quickly. This literally can prove to be more costly and disruptive than just paying the ransom outright. Look, extortion is always wrong. It's bad. But with this bill, you're punishing the victim. At this point of at the point of a ransomware attack on a hospital or on a power grid, our priority should be the people. This bill turns hospital beds into death beds. It turns power system into systematic losses of power. It prioritizes the dollar bill over our people. Fail.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Ping.
Hey, so you would contend that paying the ransomware once isn't that bad, right? Like in comparison to the side effects?
In comparison to everybody dying that is reliant on the infrastructure, yeah.
Okay, sure. Let's assume that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens whenever a company does pay a ransomware attack? Doesn't that make them an easy target for future ones?
It does, but that's why we should be passing legislation to just improve cybersecurity. So hackers literally cannot commit.
Yeah, why are those two things mutually exclusive? Why can't we pass this?
They're not.
Senator Garga,
one of them needs to happen first.
Sorry, Senator O'Neill.
Are hospitals required to have generators?
Yeah, I guess they are.
Yeah, under the status quo, every hospital is required to have a generator to be a functioning hospital, right? So that's
okay, great. So you proved
just in case of the things that you said yourself, right? So
right. So you proved one of the examples I gave as being wrong. Let's look at power grids, for example. Power grids are all centralized in one place. If you take down a power grid, the whole city loses power.
Power grids, when you take over power grid, you take out power, right? Okay, so let's look at our most prevalent issue that you just said, the hospitals, right? They have those backup generators.
I'm also saying that's like one of the issues I brought up.
Hi, Senator. So you talk a lot about how it's more cost efficient to just pay the ransom, correct? To get the data.
Yeah, that's what the Pew Research Center tells you.
Okay, how often do these companies get their data back?
That's what the point of a ransomware attack is, right? Like once you pay it off,
what incentive do hackers have to give the data back?
I mean, not really that much, but at least they free the data and let them use it.
They can just sit on it, can't they?
Okay, great. So you're just telling me more reasons why we should bolster our cybersecurity.
Senator DiStefano.
So what happens when you pay a ransomware, like from the perspective of the hackers?
They get rich.
They get more money, and they can fund more ransomware attacks, right?
Yeah.
So even if some smaller businesses are going to keep paying them illegally, when we stop these massive high-profile ransomware attacks, aren't we at least starting to cut off?
Massive high-profile ransomware attacks in general are not as common because these corporations,
but they are big revenue sources for these groups.
They have the ability to protect against it because they have cybersecurity. Small and medium firms.
I'm just not.
The speaker is thanked and may return to mute. That's granted, Senator Gargapati. All right. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Once again, thank you, Senator Jay Wu.
All right. This is Senator Wu going way earlier than I actually anticipated, but judges, I will take any nonverbal as an indication that you guys are ready. And hearing nothing, I assume I'm ready to go. 3 weeks ago, a 21-year-old hacked into T-Mobile. His testimony, their security is awful. Now, Senator Pang talked about a lot of the problems that exist, but she forgot the biggest problem in this round, the moral hazard of just paying for security or paying ransoms. The biggest problem in the status quo, according to Brookings on July 26, 2021, is that in too many cases, the insurance model incentivizes paying criminals in ransomware attacks instead of having good security in place beforehand. Companies are not even obligated to report payments of ransom to criminal gangs, and in the United States at least, there are even tax incentives that favor the payment of ransoms, but not for better security. This is because all of these companies can literally sign off on their tax returns saying, look, we lost a bunch of money paying a ransomware attack. That counts as a loss, an operating loss, that means that they don't actually get taxed in this situation. And because of that, these companies have an incentive in the status quo to let people hack them. In the affirmative world, you now remove that economic incentive for these private corporations that do nothing. Senator Konda, your entire problem block is solved by today's legislation when you now start to hold these companies responsible for literally letting a bunch of people hack them. But that's also something that's important to note, because these hackers conducting ransomware attacks are also in the status quo, demanding more money. The National Security Institute found on February 15, 2021, that the average amount of money requested by a ransomware attack has increased by nearly 20,000% since 2018. And the thing is that no one in the private sector has any incentive whatsoever to beef up security because the government literally pays for everything. That is the biggest problem in today's debate that no negation speaker will be able to counter. But then Senator Pang talks about the impacts that businesses face with revenue. But here's the most interesting statistic that I would contend is more important. Forbes found on May 2nd, 2021, that 92% of ransomware victims that pay the ransom don't even get their data back. Senator Konda, your argument is about recovering data, but that only applies to 8% of situations. Today's legislation helps solve that because it targets the root cause of ransomware attacks happening in the first place. Because there is no incentive whatsoever to beef up security, all of these ransomware and hacker groups have an incentive to exploit the current situation and get money because of the fact that all of these companies are more than willing to dole out cash. They literally lose pretty much nothing. At the end of the day, it's clear that T-Mobile isn't the only problem where their security is a joke. You pass today and you beef that up.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Chellery.
Thank you. You said that passing this legislation gets rid of the economic incentive for ransomware attacks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if someone hacks a hospital and corrupts critical info on a cancer patient's treatment, is it feasible to just expect the hospital to do nothing about that, regardless of what the law is?
Okay, so the issue with this is that 92% of those situations, the hospital doesn't even get their data back.
Sure, but even in that scenario, a hospital is not just going to sit around and do nothing, right? They're going to pay that ransom. They're still always going to be there.
I would contend that it's better to go to the government and report it so that they can
Senator
get that data.
Hi. Why is companies investing in cybersecurity and paying ransoms mutually exclusive?
So the thing is that the current system is built so that there is absolutely no incentive whatsoever to beef up cybersecurity.
So
what
if
we
a
do
company
under
is
today's legislation is actually do that.
If a company is attacked, wouldn't they be more likely to invest in their cybersecurity?
No, that's not necessarily the case because they pretty much lose.
Why? No one wants
nothing.
to get attacked, right?
Sure,
Like that's
they
not
get a bunch, so they have to spend a bunch of money to protect themselves, or they can do nothing and the government pays for it.
Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All negative speakers, that's granted Senator Gargapati. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. It's going to go to Senator Wilkes unopposed.
I thank the chair. Hello, everybody. Technically, third time today. Wilkes. I sponsored and gave the final appeal at the last debate. I'll give everyone a second. Let me know if you're not ready. I'm speaking on the negation. Okay. Everybody good? All right. In 1989, medical researcher Joseph Popp disseminated 20,000 floppy disks to researchers and clinicians, saying they contained a questionnaire to detect diseases. Instead, the disks sieged the computers, encrypting their data, and demanded compensation for the remedy. That was history's first ransomware attack. 30 years later, this legislation quite literally punishes the victims of ransomware attacks, not the perpetuators. Thus, I'm so proud to negate. The sole reason you fail this legislation is to protect your constituents' data. Senator Pang says that if a company doesn't pay ransom, there is no way for attackers to make money from a ransomware attack. But Senator Pang, hackers are much smarter than that. Brian Hornung, from the founder of Zact IT Solutions, a cybersecurity firm, writes this June that if a company won't pay ransom, hackers have two options to still make money. First, they threaten to release the data if the company doesn't pay, or second, they contact the people in the stolen data set directly and extort them. This is exactly why you fail. If hackers can't get money from companies, they'll just go after our constituents. Take a look at what has already happened in the minority of cases where companies don't pay the ransom. National Law Review wrote in May of this year that since 2019, 34 ransomware groups have leaked data stolen from 2,103 organizations. This is a groundbreaking argument for the affirmation, because if hackers can still get money, they have virtually no incentives to stop conducting attacks. But don't take my word for it. Tara Wheeler, a cyber project fellow at Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard University, confirmed in July of this year that unless these incentive problems are addressed, a ban on paying ransom will do nothing to stop attacks. If the affirmative wants to claim any decrease in ransomware attacks, make them address this argument directly. But why should you care about all of this? I want to give you the two impacts that will define this debate. First is identity theft. Jim Van Dyke at the Identity Force explains this May that leaked data, like that from ransomware attacks, is the leading cause of identity theft. A world where companies can't pay ransom is a world where tens of thousands of Americans lose access to their bank accounts, have their social security numbers leaked, or anything in between. Furthermore, Experian explains in 2019 that identity theft can damage your credit score, hurt your job prospects, or even put you in debt. Second, this harms companies by compromising their data. When data is lost, companies still have to recover that data. But if they don't pay the ransom, they don't get the data back. A May 2021 Cyber Reason report found that 60% of businesses that experienced a ransomware attack saw declines in revenue, and 29% had to lay off employees. Senator Jay Wu, no company will willingly be attacked if that's the reality they have to face. Ransomware attacks are only 30 years old, but it's this legislation that throws us back in the Stone Age.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Pang.
Hey, can you define ransomware for me?
Yeah, it's like an extortion hack. It's like a hack and they demand for money.
Okay. Yeah, specifically, it's designed for encryption and decryption of data, right? So whenever they threaten to release data, does that still fall under the definition of ransomware?
Yes, because if they encrypt it first, it's still encrypted.
No, it's different actually, because the issue here isn't whether or not it's encrypted or decrypted. The issue is that they're going to release it. That means it's no longer under the definition of ransomware.
True. If they
Senator
attack, it's still a ransomware attack.
Hi, Senator. Let's discuss incentives a little bit more. Since you talk about how hackers could still make money, regardless of whether or not ransom is paid, correct?
They will.
Mm-hmm. So do hacker groups give back data after someone pays ransom?
Yes, 96% of encrypted data gets given back to the company.
92% doesn't actually return to any of the companies when ransom is paid.
The report, it's 96%.
So I'm a little bit confused. So when is your data specifically from?
I think time has elapsed. Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. again, calling for any affirmative speakers. We're only on the third cycle of today's debate, and I really don't think it's a good idea to break cycle.
We have 6 negs and 5 apps. We're going to break cycle anyway. Why not? Like, we just do it now. We won't have to do it later.
All right, seeing no motions, I'm going to go ahead and call for Senator O'Neill. Is that a motion or a speech? You're on mute.
I don't want to break cycle this early, so I'll make the affirmation.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill.
For the judges, that is Senator O'Neill speaking for the second time in this legislative session. At your leisure, a sign that you are not ready would be perfect, but other than that, I'll go ahead and begin. Sounds like everyone's ready, and I will be timing myself for all reference. Sorry, gotta get my clock up. They say the chances of getting struck by lightning are 1 in a million. Scary, right? Well, your chances of a cybersecurity breach are 1 in 4, according to Varonis, a cybersecurity informational website. Every day, ransomware hackers take advantage of this fear and make millions of dollars. That is why it is so imperative that we pass today's legislation to stop incentivizing hackers. Affirm. But first, I want to disprove the negation's argument that this legislation will ultimately be ineffective. Senator Conda tries to scare you by saying our hospitals are going to shut down if the power grid went down. But understand that per US law, all hospitals are required to hold backup generators for these exact reasons. When I posed this question to him, he had no answer. Similarly, Senator Wilkes states that companies are going to hide the fact that they got hacked so that they could just pay the prices and not have the negatives. Understand that this is simply false because A, this legislation stipulates that the Department of Justice oversees this, and B, this legislation makes that illegal, a risk companies are not going to be willing to take. In turn, the negation tries to tell you that because we do not have a well-developed cybersecurity system means we cannot pass this legislation. But understand that the two types of legislation are not and cannot be mutually exclusive. Under the status quo, the final report of the Defense Science Board Task Force on Cyber Deterrence released last February concluded that cyber capabilities of foreign nationals exceed U.S. ability and argued that this will continue to be the case for at least another 5 to 10 years. So when we remove financial incentive today, we only maintain a reduced incentive for these attacks while we develop the deterrence that the negation suggests. Senator Wilkes and Senator Conda say that with all these factors combined, companies are going to want to pay those ransom payments anyway. But Senator Pang already told you that we double the costs when companies pay ransom, and Senator Wilkes provides data that companies are not going to recover that data anyway most of the time. So those incentives are simply not going to be there. But that brings me to my second point, which no one has surprisingly brought up. Cyber attacks have been increasingly dangerous to military equipment as they work within computer systems, meaning one hack has the ability to harm computer chips embedded in weapon platform systems, military transportation, and command and control capabilities. Many countries and international hackers are beginning to exhibit the capability of their cyber hacking programs. According to Reuters, Chinese hackers' attack on a Navy contractor in 2018 had the potential to give China access not to just details of a key new anti-ship missile, but also to much of what the Navy knows about Chinese maritime capabilities. And these breaches are costly. If governments continue to be threatened like this, Forbes predicts costs of up to $2.1 trillion. As these powers continue to grow, countries and international groups may begin to take advantage of ransom payments, an incentive we need to remove today. So senators, remove the lightning bolt from the hands of those threatening our constituents, our businesses, and our military. Prevent a strike and affirm.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Wilkes.
If I'm a hacker and a company doesn't pay my ransom, why don't I just sell the data?
Okay, because you're not getting the money. Most of these hackers don't actually want your data. They want the money that comes with the ransom payment.
They get money if they just sell the data, though, right? Like, isn't that money?
Well, the thing is, when you sell the data, when you pay these ransom hackers, you're just giving them an incentive to go to the next person, to the next person, to the next person. So we stop it at its core by actually trying to figure out where these hackers are coming from and trying to stop them at the source rather than just paying them off.
Senator Tillery.
Thank you. So I just want to take a quick analysis of what happens, right? Say we pass today's legislation and a ransomware attack happens. A company's not going to pay it, right? Is there any incentive for that information to actually get decrypted?
Well, what do you mean? Like, is there any incentive for them to not sell the data?
Gets hacked, is there any incentive for the hacker to decrypt that information if they're not going to get paid?
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, most of the time, these hackers aren't in it for the data. They're in it to get the payments that they get from the ransom.
But if they're not getting any money, there's no incentive for them to decrypt that.
Okay, but what the U.S. does when we pass this legislation is we
may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. Oh, sorry. Judge I has requested a 1-minute recess after this speech because he needs to take care of some tech issues. I'm just going to unilaterally call the recess until he tells us that it's resolved.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, you can start everything back up. My camera will be off for like a few speeches maybe, but I'm listening and still taking notes.
Sounds good. That being said, all negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Jiang, thank you.
Thank you. This is Senator Jiang speaking for the second time today. If anyone's not ready, please give me a verbal indication. Otherwise, I'll get started. Okay, great. Law professor David Bernstein once said, "For every lock, there is someone out there trying to pick it or break in." Unfortunately, this fact doesn't change whether we pass or fail. The virtual locks that will be broken will be those that belong to our most vulnerable constituents, companies and people. Fail today for two reasons. First, because this legislation would actually decrease reporting. And second, because lawbreakers don't obey the law. The first reason why you fail today is because this legislation actually decreases reporting. When testifying in front of Congress this year, senior FBI official Brian Vornman said, in many cases, cybercriminals could steal data from companies to use for additional blackmail if the attack is reported. Senator Peng's legislation actually has a trap in itself. It doesn't decrease ransomware attacks, it decreases reporting, which Senator Jay Wu said so himself is crucial. The Hill tells us on July 27th of this year that banning the payments would serve to lower reporting because it will increase cybercriminals' stranglehold on victims. This will make it virtually impossible for federal organizations like the FBI to accurately track and assess ransomware attacks. Let's take Senator Jay Wu's word for it. Hackers keep the data they take. But this legislation perpetuates the damage they do because now we don't know what's going on and attackers have room to do more damage. But next, fail because lawbreakers don't obey the law. The affirmation from Senators O'Neill to Peng in their naive advocacy forgets that cybercrime is a crime. When Senator Peng stops people from paying ransomware attacks, she forgets one thing. People who commit cybercrime and demand ransom are already breaking the law. Our law to decrease attacks won't actually do anything because these criminals don't care about whether or not they're following the law. ZDNet found on July 9th of this year that it's likely, even with a ban, that cybercriminals will go after soft targets that don't have a choice when it comes to paying a ransom, whether it's illegal or not. And according to Jen Ellis, co-chair of the Institute for Security and Technology's Ransomware Task Force, attackers will target organizations that are least able to resist paying, small or medium businesses that don't have the ability to have resilience. So, Senator Peng, here's what your legislation does. It targets and hurts the most vulnerable organizations and people who have no choice but to pay the ransom and now can't report it to the federal government. In the end, making payments illegal as a means of trying to reduce ransom attacks when ransomware attacks are already illegal is a surefire failure of an attempt. When we sit here and pledge to protect our constituents, why would we ever pass legislation that stops us from protecting them? This legislation breaks our lock.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator DeStefano.
So murder is illegal, right?
Right.
And people still commit murder even though it's against the law.
Right, that's simply
So
proof
since
that
some
this
people
legislation
don't
won't
follow our laws, we should not make laws? Like, is
No,
that what you're arguing?
No, because ransomware is already illegal, and I'm just telling you that this
Ransomware is
legislation
illegal, but
doesn't
paying
work.
ransomware isn't illegal under the status quo. It's illegal when we pass.
Right, but what I'm saying is that paying ransomware is detrimental in itself because
Paying
now we don't
ransomware
know.
is detrimental. I
No,
agree
sorry.
with you. Like, that's a bad thing.
Legislating to pay ransomware because now we don't know what's going on because there's
Senator
less
Payne.
reporting.
Hey, if a company gets attacked by ransomware, is it automatically a criminal?
The person who committed the ransom is, yes, but not the company.
Yeah, so if the victim isn't a criminal, that means they haven't committed a crime, right?
Right, but this legislation criminalizes the victim.
Yeah, so if it's not a crime yet, then where is your logic that they're already breaking the law, so they'll just break it again?
The cyber criminals are the ones that are breaking the law. This legislation criminalizes victims.
But your argument is that payments
Questioning time has elapsed. The speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Stefano, you stand unopposed.
I thank the chair. Sorry. For my judges, Parley and PO, that is Senator DeStefano, DeStefano. I spoke actually at the exact same place on the last piece of legislation. And I'm speaking on the affirmation. As always, I'm at all of your leisure. Are any of you not ready for me to get started? I'll just listen for any verbal indication, really. Today's legislation really comes down to two questions. Who do we hurt and what do we stop? So let's break down what the negation speakers have told us so far and see why their arguments simply don't hold up under examination. So Senator Conda, you claim that we need better protection and relief from ransomware attacks. I don't necessarily think you're wrong, but when you argue that the bill doesn't actually stop cyber attacks, I have to disagree. So let's go over the best and worst case scenarios when a cyber attack happens after we pass. The first scenario is that the business pays illegally. So here there's not really a change to what happens in the status quo anyway. Like the ransomware just gets paid the same way. But turn to Mimecast's State of Email Security Report, which explains that a large percentage of companies never see their data after they pay. And Proofpoint quantifies that more than 2/3 of companies who pay never see their data. But you've heard that number before. Here's why it matters. Even if some companies stop paying, which is the second scenario, most of them wouldn't have seen their data anyway. So let's go to the best case scenario. The business doesn't pay. Your own Brookings source from July 26, 2021 explains that paying ransomware inevitably funds and causes more ransomware attacks. So again, let's look at the impacts. Either payments stay the same in the status quo, or they go down and ransomware attacks go down with them. Either way, the data of businesses stays at a similar level of protection. Let's move on to Senator Wilkes. You argue that we need to protect data because hackers can sell the data they collect or abuse specific people in the data set. I don't necessarily disagree that that's a technical possibility. Like, sure, they could. Where you fail is similar to how Zhang called us naive. You're being naive in that ransomwares are good faith actors. If they were going to do that with the data because there was a profit incentive, they would do it regardless of the payment of the corporation they're holding ransom. That means we don't actually see a change. If there's sufficient profit, they'll do it anyway. Same as they hold back the data after people pay ransom. So I don't really buy that that's unique to their side. But finally, let's actually talk about data protection, because there's this myth on the neg that like these companies need massive cybersecurity like overhauls to protect themselves from ransomware attacks. But that's just not true. Turn to Mike Wilson for Forbes on July 12th, 2021, when he explains that the majority of cyber attacks are done through really easy cybersecurity errors. He points out things like phishing attacks through emails where companies just aren't giving their employees practice, or things like allowing people to remote into work desktops without using a VPN, leaving their traffic on an open network. He points out that the recent Colonial Pipeline attack that was so destructive was literally caused by one leaked password. Protecting against most ransomware attacks is not a scenario where you have to invest hundreds of or millions of dollars into cybersecurity. It's a scenario where you just have to take basic action. So when we remove the tax incentives of paying ransomware and make it illegal, we incentivize companies to do just that. Pass this bill.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Jiang.
Okay, thank you. So you and previous representatives have both said that it's not guaranteed that you get the data back even if you pay the ransom.
Yeah, right? Actually, I'd argue it's pretty guaranteed you won't, since 70% of companies aren't seeing the data.
So that means 30% of the time you get the data back when you pay the ransom, right? Okay. So then why ban ransoms when they're successful at least 30% of the time?
Because they also cause more ransomware attacks. That's what we're trying to argue. Like, you're creating this feedback loop where you fund a group which can then commit even more ransomware attacks for 30% of data.
Thanks. So let's say I agree with your argument that these hackers can just sell the data that they've stolen either way. Doesn't that literally prove that your side does not access your impacts about disincentivizing ransomware attacks?
No, it doesn't. It proves that your side's arguments are all non-unique. Like the worst case scenario, wait, I'd like to finish my answer. So the worst case scenario is that literally nothing changes when we pass this legislation.
If they're making money either way because they can always just sell the data, what is the disincentive that this?
Because they're still making less money, and because you remove tax.
The speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. It's going to go to Senator Crowley off of recency.
Hi everyone, that's Senator Crowley speaking for the second time in today's debate. Any indication if you're not ready would be great. Perfect, I'll begin. Last year, Russian ransomware attacked the government of my home city, Durham, North Carolina. As my constituents and I sat in our homes, city officials and IT workers fought to protect our private information and keep COVID-burdened hospitals up and running. The time that recovery took was devastating. Fail this bill to protect all of your cities. This debate basically breaks into two main areas. First is our economy. Senator Pang tells you that ransoms devastate company because paying ransoms is more expensive than fighting to recover from them. The State of Ransomware 2021 Global Survey uncovers that the average cost of recovering from a ransomware attack is now 10 times the size of just paying the ransom. Baltimore spent $18.2 million to recover their entire network, while just paying the ransom would have cost $76,000. Representative Conda tells you the impact of this price, hurting small businesses. Let me be the first one to quantify that. Risk IQ's 2020 intelligence brief finds that 70% of ransomware attacks are on small businesses. Passing forces small businesses to cover the 10 times higher recovery costs, driving them bankrupt. But the second area is security, and there's two parts to this. First, empowering cyber terrorists. Senator Wu Pang and DeStefano tell you that we empower a terrorist because companies don't get their money back, which means it funds terrorism when ransoms are paid. I want to put this to bed once and for all. Census-Wide explains on June 16th of 2021 that in a survey of over 1,000 security professionals who work with companies against ransomware found that only 3% of companies didn't get their data back after paying a ransom. But even if you buy that literally no one gets their data back, Senator Jiang explains that we still need ransoms to create a transaction to trace where the attacks came from. Look at what's happening right now. The DOJ is actually building a case against the attackers responsible for the Colonial attack because paying the ransom led the DOJ straight to them. Without a transaction, the DOJ literally cannot pursue any attackers or prosecute them. But the second level is personal security of Americans. The critical question the negation asks is, where do attackers go when we don't pay ransoms? It's hospitals, because they're more likely to pay. Conda says that everyone on life supports will die if hospitals are attacked, and Senator O'Neill says they have backup generators. Here's the thing. Proven Data explains in September of 2020 that it takes an average of 33 hours to switch over to a generator. Those 33 hours are a matter of life and death. The Association of American Medical Writers explains on July 20th of 2021 that in 2020, 1/4 of hospitals were attacked by ransomware, and it killed hundreds of people. It's not just Durham that this bill would hurt. Small businesses, the backbone of our economy, cannot afford this bill. Millions of patients cannot afford this bill. Fail to protect ransoms.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 14 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placard. Senator O'Neill.
Okay, so you and the entire negation have sort of rehashed the same points about hackers will take data or they're going to take the money, so in either world it's bad. But if that happens in either world, what is the net harm of having companies put that back into the hands of the government rather than their own unknowing hands?
Because you cannot trace the attackers, if there was no transaction.
Okay, but there's absolutely no chance of us doing that when companies are in charge of handling their own hacks.
That's literally what happened
if the government
Colonial attack. When the government was attacked, we tracked it.
Hi, Senator Crowley. We want companies to report whether or not they get hacked, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, great. So does the DOJ just sit on their hands when they listen and hear about someone getting hacked?
No, they actively prosecute them, like the Colonial Pipeline example.
Exactly. So we want these companies to report this, correct?
They're going to report it in either world. Like, I don't understand the uniqueness.
Okay, in the status quo, some companies aren't even reporting this. So
Why does
doesn't
that
today's
change if you
legislation
pass?
convince them to actually do so?
Questioning time is elapsed. Speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Once again, calling Senator Gargapati.
I thank the chair. Speaking for the second and last time this session, that's Senator Gargipati, spelled Garigipati. Again, at the leisure of everyone above me, any indication when you're ready would be great.
Before you begin, it may just be my internet. Is anyone else having glitchy issues when he was starting to speak? No, so it's just, okay, so let me leave the round and come right back. I just don't want to drop out in the middle of your speech.
Maybe we should turn our cameras off.
Let's see what happens when she comes back. That's probably a better idea.
While we're on a break, just to let the rest of you know, we have about 45 minutes left in this session, just to be wary of time.
I guess for the entire chamber, we aren't going to go for a third speech. Anyone, right? All right, don't.
Point of privilege. Exit the chamber. I just put it in the chat as well.
Granted, yeah.
Okay, it seems better.
Okay, if you need us to, you can like type in the chat and we can turn off our cameras if that will help your connection. Just let us.
Yeah, no, I think it's good now. I was just getting some glitchy issues and I didn't want it to go out in his speech. So thank you.
Senator Gargapati, you're good to begin. You're muted.
I'm going to get my timer started and get ready. Oftentimes, our enemies swing on the assumption that we will swing back. But America doesn't capitulate to the bullies. We don't give in to what criminals tell us to do. We crack down on the criminals themselves. Today's legislation slams a door in the face of ransomware attackers from every direction. Put a lock on that door with your ballot. Affirm. The only question that this debate revolves around is how do hackers react to this legislation? I'll spend the next 3 minutes answering with telling you how an affirmative ballot is the best answer to it. Pass this legislation to remove the incentive to hack in the first place. Look at the analysis that Senator Payne gave you at the beginning of this round. If no profit can be achieved, then there is no incentive to hack in the first place. That is the analysis that prerequisites every single concern of everyone on the negation. Senator Wilkes and Conda, hacking can't harm people if they don't want to hack in the first place. My playground experience tells me that it's better to deal with the bully by removing the reason they want to mistreat the victim. Senator Conda, if you increase cybersecurity, the hackers can just increase the intensity of their attacks in response. Senator Crowley and Chillery say that if they hack and can't get paid, then there's no incentive to return the data that they stole. I am telling you that they won't have that data in the first place because they know they're not going to get paid, so they're not going to to waste the effort trying to take it. Every attack they do in the status quo gives them more money that they can spend on reinvesting into future attacks, fueling a cycle in which what Senator Crowley and Conda are afraid of only keeps getting more likely. It's why the Singapore press holding explains that a whopping 80% of organizations with paid ransom demands experienced a second ransomware attack afterwards. Senator Crowley, you're empowering the hackers in the status quo. You can't solve a problem by building up a shield. You remove the sword. This legislation does just that. Senator Crowley, you say this bill makes it harder to find the criminals because we don't have a way to track them when we can't pay. But we stop them from committing crimes in the first place. You don't need to pursue hackers who don't hack. Next, Senator Wilkes tells you that the attackers will target consumers if they can't get money from the businesses themselves. But this shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what this bill is legislating against. Ransomware based in encryption. They cannot do that if they encrypt the data. The Washington Post in July 2015 corroborates that even those who encrypt data cannot see the data unless it is decrypted. Senator Wilkes, if they decrypt the data to sell it to someone else, it means the company that they originally took it from has access to it again and can seize back control. This is a cop-out argument for Congress to not take action. Moreover, Section 1 of this bill doesn't specify who cannot pay the ransom. It just says ransoms cannot be paid, period. This means that literally no one can pay a ransomware hacker from no matter whether they are victimized or not. There is no way for them to get money for the work that they are doing, so they're not going to hack in the first place. But next, Senator Jiang and Crowley are concerned that smaller and more vulnerable companies will pay anyways, but they don't fall into the characterization of lawbreakers that Senator Jiang paints. They're still going to follow the law because there's consequences to it. A smaller company doesn't want the DOJ cracking down on them. They're going to listen to this law, and that hackers are no longer going to hack them. Crush the bullies with this legislation. We can stand up to hackers, and we can stand for what America is about. It starts with passing.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Crowley.
Hi, so when we pass, are all hackers just going to throw in the towel and give up?
Yeah.
Are all companies going to abide by this legislation when paying a ransom is 10 times cheaper?
I mean, no, it's only cheaper than if they were to get hacked, but they're not going to get hacked because there's no incentive for them to hack.
If there's an incentive for companies to pay the ransom, there's always going to be an incentive for the ransom attack to happen.
The incentive to paying the ransom only exists if the ransom attack happens in the first place. It's the ideal to pay first
Senator Wilkes.
To hack first.
So if someone robs a gas station, but then they kill someone in the process, it's a murder, but it's also robbery, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if a hacker attacks, and then they extort the people, isn't it still a ransomware attack?
No, because the moment they try and extort the people, it becomes like they have to decrypt the data to extort the people. Then the company can take the data back.
And also, beyond that, why don't they just sell the data once they get it?
Because they would have to decrypt the data to sell it. You can't see the data if it's encrypted.
Questioning time has elapsed. Speakers thanked and may return to mute.
I thank the chair.
The chair thanks you. All negative speakers, please raise your placard. That's going to go to Senator Chiluri unopposed.
Thank you. That's Senator Chiluri. Just to make sure again, everyone can hear me okay? Perfect. Second and probably final time today. Again, if any of you are not ready, let me know. Otherwise, I'll get started as soon as possible. Great. Everyone looks good. For the last hour, this debate has gone back and forth on pure facts on whether or not the affirmation or negation is right. As the final speaker on the negation, let's take today's debate down to its two critical issues to understand why the negation wins and should take your ballot at the end of this round. First, ask yourselves the question, are ransomware payments in the status quo even effective? I would contend that they are. Senators DeCito and Jonathan Wu, both of you try to talk about how it doesn't matter whether you pass this piece of legislation, because regardless, only 92% of the information doesn't actually get back when ransomwares are paid. So because of that, paying a ransomware is useless. Here's the problem with that. Let's take an analysis of what happens when you affirm this legislation. Say you affirm and a hack happens. In your world, companies don't pay that hack, and there's no incentive for hackers to decrypt that information because they're not getting any money. In that scenario, 0% of ransomware attacks end up getting information back. But second, in our world, if a company is allowed to pay that ransom, at the very least, on the same statistic that Senator Wu gives you, there's at least an 8% chance that that information gets returned. That outweighs any impact the affirmation can give you, and that's because of healthcare. I'm not talking about the generator debate that's been going on in this round. Let me talk to you about pure critical healthcare information, because Stacy Weiner, a senior staffer at the American Association of Medical Colleges in 2021, explains that ransomware attacks during the COVID-19 pandemic have skyrocketed on hospitals. For example, in the University of Vermont, computer networks were locked down for over a month, electronic health records were shut down, and most importantly, treatment for cancer patients had to be postponed because nobody knew when or if that treatment was supposed to happen. At that point, the single impact of even saving one life in the short term far outweighs any sort of ransomware problem the affirmation can give you in the long term. Passing today's piece of legislation takes lives. That's the only incentive you should need to fail. But second, ask yourselves the question, do ransomwares actually persist in the long term when you affirm this legislation? Senators Gargapati, DeStefano, O'Neill, and Jay Wu, all of you try to explain that passing this legislation reduces the incentive for a ransomware attack to happen in the first place. That's objectively not true. Let's take a look at the situation regardless of whether you pass or fail this legislation. If I'm a hacker and I hack a hospital threatening lives, there's no reason to assume that the hospital is just going to sit around and let a hacker kill someone. At that point, hospitals are always going to have the incentive to pay a ransom regardless of law, and because of that, hackers are always going to have the incentive to continue ransomware attacks. The outweighing mechanism of a single life still stands at that point. But second, Senator Jay Wu tries to further this by saying that companies in the status quo don't have the incentive to invest into cybersecurity. Here's the problem with that. It's not that companies don't have the incentive to invest into cybersecurity. No company wants to get hacked. They have that incentive. The problem is that they can't. CNBC in October of 2020 quantifies that Microsoft, a large company, recently released a $20 billion plan for cybersecurity. I put the burden on the affirmation to find one small company who can afford to bolster their cybersecurity that much. At that point, the affirmation's impacts remain non-unique because regardless, ransomware attacks persist. Negate.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Gargapati.
Let's walk down a chain of events. What happens first? A company wondering whether they pay a hacker or the hack itself?
Obviously the hack itself.
Yeah, so if the hack itself is less likely to happen because the company cannot pay,
but it's not, right? A hacker's incentive to hack is based on whether or not someone's going to pay them. Regardless of whether you pass or fail, a hospital or anyone who's hacked is going to want to pay. That doesn't make any difference.
The DOJ is going to crack down on them if they do. A lot of hospitals don't do things because they're against the law.
I would argue that's just like morally wrong, right? If a hospital can save a life,
hospitals do things that are morally wrong.
Okay, so right now ransomware payments are actually tax deductible, right?
Okay, sure.
So don't you understand how if businesses can just deduct the ransomware payment from their taxes and move on, they have an incentive to just pay them as they come as opposed to invest in cybersecurity?
Okay, I would argue that rather than paying a ransomware and getting hacked in the first place, no company wants to get hacked, right? That's
okay, but it's a tax deductible payment, so so basically net zero versus having to invest in cybersecurity
and then save a couple $1 million. Than
you might rather that, but a profit-based corporation disagrees.
The speaker is thanked and may return to mute. All affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. Once again, calling for any affirmative speakers. Seeing none, the chair frowns upon breaking cycle, but all negative speakers, please raise your placards. Senator Ziwu, you have the floor.
Thanks. Hi, all. Senator Zach Wu, second time today. Last name is still spelled W, 2 letters. This time I'm on the negation. I think I'm closing out this debate. Any indication from my judges when they're ready, and I'm happy to begin. Okay, looks like everyone is good to go. Let me just get a timer. Perfect. In the US, any concession to terrorist demands are illegal. That's what we mean when we say America never negotiates with terrorists. Today's legislation is clearly an effort to replicate this policy in cyberspace. It asserts that we must never negotiate or give in to cyber criminals. But it's easy for the government to say, don't negotiate with criminals when it has zero stake in the property that is being lost. It's easy for Congress to tell its people that too bad, so sad, because it's not our data that is gone. In my 3 minutes, I will deal with the strongest case of the affirmative, that there's less cyber attacks overall in the long term, and the worst case of my side, where ransomware payments fail 100% of the time for every company and prove that you still vote no. First, here's what my side has been telling you this entire time. Malicious hackers make money either way, irrespective of whether a ransom payment is made. Why is that important? Because it kicks out the strongest argument of the affirmative, decreasing ransomware attacks in the long term. Ransomware victims who do not pay a ransom now are facing a bigger nightmare than ever, as criminals are willing to sell and distribute the release files on dark web hacker forums. This is why the Banking Journal confirmed last week that exfiltrated, not decrypted data from ransomware attacks has proliferated on the dark web by nearly 30% in the last year. So, Senator DeStefano, you say that hackers would just do this anyway. You're right. That's exactly why the affirmative cannot claim any offense from disincentivizing ransomware attacks. Because either A, ransom is paid and hackers win, or B, ransom isn't and hackers win. This is the opposite of a disincentive. But second, let's talk about whether ransom is an effective response to attacks. Senator Wilk's argument about identity theft for individuals, I think, is particularly salient here, but it's been cold conceded for this entire debate. Even if you don't buy that there's a lot of scenarios where companies need the option of paying ransom to get their data back, like Senator Conda argues, buy that there are a wealth of scenarios where private citizens do. The March 2021 Strauss Center for International Security reports that in a survey of 1,300 ransomware disruptions for individual private citizens, nearly 70% of all individuals were able to recover their data in full. So that means even if 100 out of 100 ransomware payments fail for private companies, at the very least, preserve the individual's right and liberty to pay ransom, because in 7 out of 10 cases, it works. This is literally now the worst case of my side. You would still vote no. If you remember nothing else from this debate in the previous question, remember this. Ransomware crimes are already a fundamental violation of rights. When companies or individuals get hacked, their data and their lives are now in limbo. Now, this government is violating another through this bill, the right for these people to reclaim it. Data has value. Remember that message.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. All questioners, please raise your placards. Senator Payne.
Hey, let's talk about selling data. The definition of ransomware is whenever a company or an individual pays in order to have data decrypted. Does that mean that preventing that data from being sold falls into the same definition?
So what happens is they can exfiltrate the data without decrypting it back to companies and then putting it up on the dark web to be auctioned off for a high profit.
But preventing the data from being sold is the main issue here. That means it doesn't fall under the same definition. Doesn't that mean that this legislation
Questioning time has elapsed. Senator O'Neill.
Okay, so as every single affirmation speaker has proved, when one company unilaterally decides to pay a ransom payment, they increase the chance of the next company being hacked and held for ransom, right? So what gives companies that right?
My side has dealt with this argument 1,000 times. My argument is not that companies need this, because even if companies don't need this 100% of the time, you should still preserve the right for individuals because it works more effectively for individuals.
Okay, but if it's affecting people outside of their personal jurisdiction, doesn't that
time has elapsed? Speakers may return to mute. Senator Conda, do you have a motion?
I move to orders of the day.
All right, I'm gonna ask for a previous question because orders of the day technically means that we have unfinished legislative business. Is there another motion, Senator Gargapati?
I move to previous question.
Is there a second? All those who wish to pass for previous question? All right, that's clearly 2/3. So the chair now recognizes Senator Payne for their final appeal.
Thank you. Everyone can see and hear me okay, right? Awesome. This is Representative Pang giving the final appeal. Just to be sure, this final appeal is 90 seconds, right, Senator Khan? Okay, great. If I could just have any signal from my judges and PO. Over the course of this debate, arguments on both sides have become incredibly convoluted. So allow me to spend the next 80 or so seconds actually solving this. First, I want to dismantle the premise of the negation, which is that paying ransomware is necessary to retrieve data. In my sponsorship, I literally tell everyone that most of the time, you can retrieve data via backups without ever needing to pay the ransom in the first place. And then second, Senator Jay Wu proves to you that companies only get data back 8% of the time. At that point, there's only a painfully small amount of companies that A, can't retrieve their data through backups, and B, actually get their data back. At that point, the affirmation provides ultimate solvency because when there's no profit for these criminals, they don't attack in the future. Senators Z, Wu, and Wilkes attempt to argue that the criminals are simply just going to sell the data. But as I just proved in the previous questioning period, the definition of ransomware is that companies pay money to have their data decrypted. It doesn't matter if it's encrypted or decrypted when it's sold. That means that preventing data from being sold no longer falls under the definition of ransomware. This legislation doesn't ban that. The affirmation has proven that there's no incentive for future attacks. That essentially means that none of the negation impacts from Senators Crowley or Shalluri actually ever trigger in the negations world. At that point, there's no argument on the negation that still stands. You have to pass my legislation to ensure that our people are finally protected, not only in the present, but far into the future.
Thank you for that final appeal of 1 minute and 39 seconds. We'll now be moving to voting on today's piece of legislation. All those who wish to pass, please raise your placard and keep it up. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those who wish to fail, please raise your placard and keep it up. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any abstentions? There should be none. On a vote of 5 to 6 to 0, today's legislation does fail. My condolences to Senator Payne. Are there any motions on the floor? Senator Jiang.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those who wish to pass the movement to adjourn, please raise your placard. That's unanimous, so we will be adjourning. Before I hand things back to our wonderful parliamentarian, I'm just going to give a quick summary of today's round. Today was a really great round. I enjoyed sharing it with all of you. We got through 22 speeches, 2 final appeals, and 52 questions, which was the maximum amount that we could have given, which means we filled every slot. Everyone gave at least 2 speeches and at least 4 questions, and we passed one bill and failed the other. Already makes us better than real Congress, so congratulations, everybody. For the judges, I'm Senator Isaac Kahn. It was an honor to be your presiding officer today, and I am a competitor. If you think I did a good job running this round, feel free to include me in your ballots. For everybody else, at 5:03 p.m. Eastern Time, I officially call today's session adjourned, and I wish you the best of luck in rewards.
Congratulations, debater. It was an honor to be one of your judges this afternoon, and good luck, and enjoy the rest of your season also.
Thank you all so much. I know that Kimberly asked the judges to stay around. So competitors, I think you're good to go. And
just have a couple of announcements. Really competitors. Okay, so again, congratulations to everyone for making the final round at Yale. You should all be so proud of yourselves. And it was such an honor to be able to listen to your very intricate argumentation. So congratulations to all of you. A couple of reminders about the awards ceremony.